Join the conversation with the Morning Majlis, Pulse 95.
What will travel look like in the year 2021? That is the question we're asking. Has anyone planned any holidays and stuff? Because I spoke to a few people yesterday, in fact, whilst I was venturing out into touristy hotspots off the country. I met a lot of people from the UK,
Nice.
and they were sadly a bit disappointed with not being able to fly home for the festive period. And they were talking to me about and saying, you know what, I'm planning my journey in July. They said, look, I cannot be...
Most of them, yeah.
Because the thing is, here in the United Arab Emirates, there's a lot of people that have obviously come from abroad, right? Their homes or bases are abroad, their parents are abroad. They can't spend too much time away from them. And they want to utilize their annual leaves in a way that they go. But then the biggest concern for me had always been, should that country, wherever I travel to, impose some form of restriction, that is going to be very costly for me. And that is the massive deterrent at the moment. Not the PCR tests, not the other regulations, maybe quarantining in a hotel for a number of days, the mandatory quarantine for 14 days, or that country stopping flights altogether. That is my biggest deterrent.
Absolutely, and you brought up the cost as well. I mean, when you go to another country, it's almost like a business, like the whole getting tested thing, getting a vaccine shot. All those different logistics really make the thought of traveling to another country a lot harder to bear, at least for me.
Yeah, it's funny that you mentioned the UK. The UK in particular, it is set to resume global flights as early as May 17th. That is according to its latest lockdown exit plan. But experts, they did say that it could be many months before the traditionally popular UK-UAE route regains even a part of its former glory. So... But yeah, a lot of Britons, they're actually hopeful that flights and travel will go back to normal by the end of July. I think it's because they want to inoculate everyone by the end of July.
Yeah, that's the plan.
Right?
That's the
That is the
goal,
plan.
right.
So that's why they're hopeful that things will change by then.
That's
Next month, schools will be back
in the UK?
in the UK.
Yeah, they say that.
That's what they said.
That's the question.
And then in April, they have another opening. I don't know what I think.
Yeah.
The restaurants, maybe?
The thing is, that's the idea, and a lot of people have the same sentiments. They say that, it's not going to happen. Everyone knows. I mean,
It all depends on the numbers.
it all depends on the numbers because,
Right.
look, a country like the United Arab Emirates, we're a very young population. Yeah, we do have very strict, when people fine you, we find, there's a huge respect for authorities over here.
Yeah. Right.
If a police officer turns up, you're scared. In the UK, it's a total opposite. And people just think it's my right. I'm going to do what I want. So that's another problem, and that is a general sort of an issue. Saying as soon as they let loose, people will go crazy, and
Definitely.
and they'll go out to the places, and won't be any social distancing, and they'll be gathering at certain venues, and it's just a bit of a challenge to enforce it. So it's going to be very difficult for them to do so. Boris Johnson did say that they are going to inoculate everyone by July 31. But for us, it's very important that travel does resume, because at the moment we saw in the United Arab Emirates, we tested the your face is your passport thing.
Right.
That you just go in through a smart tunnel. You don't need to show your passport. You limit the contact. So I think that will be the future of travel. Your business card might be on your phone. In Europe, when I traveled around, you didn't get a boarding card. You got a boarding card on your app. You use your app because saving paper.
Right.
So I'm guessing this is what's going to be the future of travel. Your boarding card's going to be on your app. Your passport details, everything will be probably
And your
on
COVID-19 vaccination passport,
Yeah.
that's like the
That's
new thing now.
Yes.
Maybe that's going to be the new norm as well.
Yeah, it definitely will.
Yeah.
Definitely will.
It's like, are you vaccinated? Get in. If you're not, stay where you
That
are.
was one of the reasons when Sharjah Broadcasting Authority did the vaccine drive. That was one of my biggest motivating factors. I
Right.
knew that eventually we will need it.
It will be mandatory.
Yeah. So I'll get it done because, obviously the HR department's done well to organise it, and there's a huge push from the wise leadership to get their vaccine drive done. And so why not take part in it? And I knew there might be a time when there'll be no more appointments. And this is...
That's right. It did happen.
Yeah, and it did
kinda
happen. So,
But yeah, 2021 is actually, it's set to become a transitional year with a long and bumpy road ahead to recovery. Why is that? Meaningful progress on a travel rebound, it hinges on many factors. It hinges on the speed of vaccine distribution, the ability to restore passenger confidence, the availability of state aid, accessing to financing, standardized government policies, economic recovery, and also containment of the unpredictable virus, and also you never know the viruses that may come ahead.
Yeah.
We have so many new viruses, and
that's true.
not just the mutations, the new viruses that might come out. You never know. You know what I mean?
It's that uncertainty makes it really hard to plan travel
Exactly.
ahead. I mean, back then you'd plan travel. Okay, in the summer I'm going to go 6 months from now, however long it will be. But now everything is so last minute. If I'm going to go somewhere, it's going to be a last minute call.
Exactly. It should be last minute.
And you never know what's going to happen
These
either.
things are so vague now. Yeah.
Pretty much.
And there will be some
calculate.
silver linings for sure,
Yeah.
including
Yeah.
the introduction of digital health passports, as we just talked about. It's supposed to ease cross-border travel, but that I think we will be kind of controlled when it comes to, are you vaccinated?
Yeah.
Are you not vaccinated? That is another factor that will definitely affect, because a lot of people still fear vaccines.
That's true. I do need to calculate my annual leave so that I can plan my days, because you got to do it. But I think, and I can be wrong or may not be wrong. For the time being, it's not been a very interesting time to travel because the weather's been amazing here in the United Arab
That's so
Emirates.
true.
But as soon as summer hits, I am pretty sure majority of the people saying, no, I'm going to stay here, I'm going to do my staycation, are going to flee. They're going to say, I'm leaving. Definitely need my break now. I've saved up so many annual leaves, and there'll be a huge applications for those
That's
annual
right.
leaves because summer here, especially after a wonderful, glorious weathers that we've got and a great winter we've got so far, it's going to be slightly more annoying. But hopefully we get used to it. You never know. But let us know on the text lines 4215. What are you planning to do with your annual leaves that you haven't used? And are you going to go travel? Are you going to get used to
The
the
travel cost as well. We should talk about that as well.
Oh, yeah.
That's something else. That's
Ticket prices
another
are
factor.
pricey.
They're so pricey now.
Yeah.
It's unbelievable. Like tickets that I pre-pandemic era, a ticket, for example, that I would get for 900, now I'm getting for 1,800. That's double, at least.
Well,
Yeah.
well, but that will
So that's another factor
well,
that's going to definitely affect the travel sector.
certainly is. We'll calculate our wallets. We'll calculate our current situation. So in line with that, with the business news headlines for you, and we shall return right after that. Up next, we're talking about the all-important thing in China, new law that is encouraging husbands to pay their wives for housework. What's going on? Let's seek more clarity on that. Stay with us. This is the Morning Majlis on Pulse 95.
Join the conversation with the Morning Majlis, Pulse 95.
Going over to Australia, a game-changing and unprecedented law has been passed. This law now will force tech companies to pay publishers for news content and sets the stage for a potentially similar action in other countries. The new code, which the Australian Parliament approved, will, quote, ensure that news media businesses are fairly remunerated for the content they generate, according to Australian Treasurer Josh Frydenberg in his statement. Now, this has been part of a long-standing debate in the country over the past few months. Facebook and Google were not too happy with the proposed changes in legislation, which would have allowed media outlets to bargain either individually or collectively with the government and to enter binding arbitration if the parties could not reach an agreement. Facebook even shut down its news pages in Australia last week in opposition to the law, but restored them earlier this week after the country made some changes to the code, including a provision that, quote, must take into account whether a digital platform has made a significant contribution to the sustainability of the Australian news industry through reaching commercial agreements with news media businesses.
Well, both Facebook and Google, they have fought against this law ever since last year. Essentially, Australia, it will become actually the first country where a government-appointed arbitrator can decide on the final price that either platform will have to pay Australian news publishers, provided a commercial deal cannot be reached independently. Now, this decision will come by a ruling in favor of either party. the digital platform or the publisher, with no room for a middle ground agreement. That is according to experts, what they said. Now, in this week's amendments, the government said the parties involved will get a 2-month mediation period to broker deals before they are made to enter arbitration as a last resort. And Facebook announced Monday it will restore news pages in Australia, reversing an earlier decision to block access to news content in Australia in retaliation against the then proposed bill. But Facebook's vice president for global news partnerships, he said Tuesday the Australian government clarified that the tech company will retain the ability to decide if news appear on its platform so that it won't automatically be subject to a forced negotiation. As for Google, well, they initially threatened to pull its search function from Australia. But in recent weeks, however, it did strike a number of prominent commercial agreements with Australian publishers, including the Murdoch family-owned media conglomerate News Corp.
Yeah, and looking at the response from Facebook, Nick Clegg is a very prominent figure, former Deputy UK Prime Minister, now Facebook's Vice President of Global Affairs and Communications, said the tech firm had been forced into the position of blocking content designated as news after the Australian government refused to back down over plans to require it to negotiate with news publishers for payment of content. Nick Clegg said that it wasn't a decision taken lightly, where he wrote a post headlined "The Real Story of What Happened with News on Facebook in Australia." He said, but when it came, we had to take action quickly because it was legally necessary to do so before the new law came into force. Much of this was thankfully reversed very quickly. Facebook reversed the ban after the government had agreed to make minor changes to its new media code, allowing the company more time to negotiate payments and giving it a possible exemption from the law if it made a big enough contribution to the Australian media voluntarily.
Yeah, it really goes to show just how much power tech companies have, because when Facebook flexed its muscles and pulled the news media from its website, Australian politicians had to cave in and immediately made changes to the legislation. Analysts are saying maybe if the Australian government held its nerve a little bit more, had the news ban persisted, there might have been a bit of an opening for a social media platform that rivals Facebook in Australia. But now that the things have changed and Facebook is back in, following those changes in legislation, Facebook continues to maintain its firm grip on power on the social media front. Google took a different approach when all of this went down. While it did continue protesting this new law, it argued that it misunderstood the publishing market and made some negotiations with News Corp and more than 50 other Australian news organizations. So they had to essentially pay up for that. It's going to be interesting to see how other countries around the world who are monitoring the situation will now try and take things into their own hands and force those social media companies to negotiate with news organizations. It's expected that that's probably going to happen.
But in terms of us as individuals, to what extent do we rely on Facebook for news? Do we go on Facebook for news?
I personally don't own a Facebook account.
Oh.
I don't have one, so I don't rely on it. But my family members, they actually do, especially in Iraq.
Yeah.
Because in different regions, it's different how much they rely on certain social media platforms. For example, in regions like Iraq, in Egypt as well, I heard.
Yeah, it was called the Facebook Revolution back then.
They rely so much. They rely heavily on Facebook for news and what's happening, especially when it comes to protests. And the latest is happening back when there was for example, in Iraq, the October protests were going on. So they would communicate with each other through Facebook.
Wow.
Like all the protesters, they would tell each other, like they would send signals to each other. We're in this place. We're gonna come out this time. We're gonna gather together, for example, at this time. Yeah. So it was all through Facebook.
Ahmed, are you a big Facebook user?
Well, I'm not much of a Facebook user, no. I think for news, I like Twitter because everybody's on it, like all the journalists, the news writers, the news organizations. It really is a big conversation that plays out there, and it's such an effective medium for news. You get the headline, the link, it's pretty much there as well, and various responses. So I think for a news journalist type environment, it's pretty important. But Facebook cannot be understated. I think everybody we know is a pretty big, heavy Facebook user at some point or another.
Definitely, I think at least the older generation, not to berate them in any way or whatever, but it's just a friendly, useful tool, and a tool that had been there for that people were used to. Yes, there's a lot of a new generation that rely on Instagram for news because they just want quick information to their face. That's it. No more details. Just an image with a big text saying this will happen, and people rely on that. And they say, "Oh my God, this is happening." So a lot of shareable content has now become the new norm in terms of consumption in our part of the world because of a younger generation as well. And Facebook is a very important platform because
for sure.
I am also a regular contributor to a local daily, and then all these local dailies in the United Arab Emirates all rely on Facebook as well for their videos, the social media news bulletins, and that's been the key area of focus. So you can understand how the platforms are very, very important. But do get involved on the text lines 4215 should you have an opinion about it. Would you like to share your thoughts on the matter of how important Facebook is for your news consumption? But we're also celebrating a very important national day and the Liberation Day. Should you know which country we're referring to, do drop us a text on 4215. Rani, if I can pronounce the name of their dish properly again, mutabbag?
Mutabbag. According to you.
Yes, and they've also got very nice zubaydi fish with their majbous. So if you know which country we're referring to, then do get involved on the text lines 4215. We'll be back very shortly. Up next is Ed Sheeran with Shape of You.
Join the conversation with the Morning Majlis, Pulse 95.
Everybody, welcome back to the program. Now, if you'd like to join this conversation, we'd love to hear your thoughts on this. Text us at 4215. We're talking about a landmark ruling in China as part of a divorce settlement. A Chinese divorce court has ordered a husband to pay his wife for the housework she carried out during their 5-year marriage. This is the first ruling of its kind following the introduction of a new marriage law in China, and a judgment that has sparked heated debate about putting a monetary value on unpaid work that is mostly done by women at home. The topic was viewed more than 400 million times on Weibo, China's Twitter-like service.
Yes, and this is an incredible new development. So now the court has ordered that the woman will receive... this is only for, let's clarify, this is for divorce situations, right? Not just generally. Okay. But some people like it generally as well. They say, hey, you gotta give me a decent pocket money for, or if should they not be working as well, and for the amount of housework. I believe it should be equally shared. I think if there's a requirement for both the husband and wife to be doing housework, they should share some chores and have that. But the new
Would you do it, Abdikarim?
What, sharing chores? I have to do most of the work. Anyways, it's fine.
Are you open to that?
I think it's I would be open to paying. Or open to
No, to doing chores.
Oh no, sometimes it's
splitting the responsibilities.
Splitting the responsibilities, hands down. That has been my requirement. Yes, and I think I do quite a lot of it as well. Anyways, but yeah, I think things can be a bit more streamlined in the Hanif household for sure. But coming back to the developments here, this is. It's usually in compensation in a divorce. Previously, divorcing spouses could only request such a compensation should an agreement had been signed, an uncommon practice in China. But now it's mandated by law. I think that's a pretty good move.
Definitely. It's actually a first of its kind of law under China's new civil code, and it's a wide-ranging legislative package that the Chinese government and legal experts say will better protect the rights of individuals. And it's going to be in effect, or it's been in effect since January, in fact, and it includes a clause enabling a spouse to seek compensation from their partner during divorce, again, for taking more responsibility in caring for children, and also elderly relatives. That's just to go into more details. And the ruling, which was first reported by local media early this month, it became a trending topic on Weibo, as you said, Ahmed. And this week, after a hashtag was created to draw attention to the court's decision. So as of yesterday, the hashtag has been viewed more than 500 million times. It was a big story. While some comments also applauded the ruling as a recognition of the hard, unpaid labor at home, others said the amount awarded was kind of too little to cover 5 years of housework and childcare as well.
Yeah, that's the thing. There is some debate as well as to the amount itself, especially when compared to Western countries. For instance, in Britain, when you go through a divorce and you have to come to a divorce settlement, the court takes into consideration the contributions from both parties to their family, including housework or caring for the family, and then they assign an amount for that. The thing about, or the argument for that form of settlement that we're now seeing in China and that happens in other parts of the world is when women get married, a lot of the time when it comes to quote-unquote unpaid labor, they tend to bear the brunt of it and also overall tend to make more career sacrifices when compared to their male counterparts. For instance, child rearing, taking care of children. Those are all tasks that they end up compromising on their professional life to do. So the argument for those types of compensations is that upon a divorce, based on the sacrifices that a woman has putting her career on the sidelines to try and care for a family, there should be a compensation for that. And that's what the legal judgment here is ruling.
Well, I think it's a pretty good ruling to consider that, and the amount of sacrifices one has to make to continue or let their or maintain their lives at home as well. So very, very useful information and a useful new judgment being ruled out in China. Well, time now for us to shift our discussions. We will continue to keep you entertained this morning and updating you with all the traffic developments as well. Stay with us on the Morning Majlis. We got lots of music for you, and up next we'll be talking about the COVID-19 scenario here in the Emirates of Sharjah and what the Sharjah municipality is also doing for that. Stay with us. We'll be right back.
Pulse 95. Between local lines. Notes from the Emirate.
Well, Sharjah municipality affirmed its keenness to intensify inspection visits to all food establishments here in the Emirate of Sharjah to ensure its commitment to health requirements and also controls regulating the workflow and the preventive measures to limit the spread of COVID-19 according to the circulars issued, as well as to organize continuous awareness campaigns as well.
That's right. Workers here in the Emirate have been diligent about conducting those inspections to various restaurants, cafeterias, and other establishments. And it's not just about making those inspection visits to try and detect any violations. They play a role in advising and obliging workers to carry out good practices. They tell them to wash their hands with soap and water regularly. They also ask people to periodically stop everyone who shows any symptoms of respiratory infection from work. So it's all about instilling good, healthy work practices at these establishments.
Definitely is, and it's all about the continuation and intensification of those inspection visits to ensure that people are implementing and are committed to them. So far, the inspection teams of the Food Control Department carried out more than 43,193 inspection visits to food establishments such as restaurants, bakeries, cafeterias, and others. So it's been a very, very busy time for the teams, but that is the latest emerging from the world of civic bodies to ensure that people are complying with the regulations. But for us now on the Majlis, we are going to be heading off, and we would love to hear your thoughts and messages, and happy Kuwaiti National and Liberation Day to all of you who might be celebrating today. Do stay tuned to the station. But if you'd like to catch up with most of the discussions that we've had today, where can they catch them?
They can absolutely catch them on Spotify, SoundCloud, and Apple Podcast. Just type in Morning Majlis to the search bar and check out our conversations, discussions, and interviews as well. We're also on YouTube at Pulse 95 Radio, where we upload daily and host the Pulse 95 live stream. Thank you all for joining in today's program and texting us at 4215. Stay tuned. This is the Morning Majlis.
If you liked this episode of the Morning Majlis, drop a like and subscribe.
95.
Be sure to follow us on Instagram for all our daily updates and top stories.
Pulse.